This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, it's an architecture special. We visit a new boardwalk in London designed by Asif Khan. And we talk kiosks, a commonplace mass-produced modular system. Plus, we preview Monocle magazine's new special edition, The Entrepreneurs, which is on newsstands now. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. The sounds of nature, or more specifically the wetland habitats at Canada Water in the south of London. Here, a new bright red boardwalk weaves its way across a wetland in a waterside urban landscape. The structure is the work of Asif Khan, an architect and multidisciplinary designer who also grew up near this particular pocket of the UK capital. To hear more about the project, here's Asif telling us how the local area inspired this new design.
Canada Dock, where we're standing, is a body of water that was part of a larger system called Surrey Docks. And there's been water on this site connecting to the Thames and being part of the importing and exporting of goods for 400 years now. This site and this body of water, if we think about it, is connected not only to the Thames, but to the Atlantic Ocean, and beyond that to, and this particular dock being called Canada Dock, was connected to Canada and the rivers and forests of Canada, where timber used to be brought from, all the way over here, and it travelled across these, the Serpentine Ottawa River, across the ocean waves, up the Thames, and landed here. So it's funny to think that this is not just a piece of London, it's also a piece of the world, and it's a piece of several hundred years of continuous history. So if we were here in the 1780s, we would have seen 20-metre high piles of wood, of white and red pine from the Canadian forests. We would have seen deal porters, who were reputedly the most skilled workers of the London dockers, who'd be carrying 10-metre long planks of sawn timber or deal on their shoulders across 9-inch gangways across the water, carrying those things from ship to shore and stacking them. But if you came here 3 years ago, there was no timber on site at all. There was a great deal of wildfowl and it's a wetland, but there wasn't a memory of the past that could connect us to those people and that material. So I wanted to build something that could connect us from and be the entrance point to the site, but was also a piece in timber that would remind us of the importance that material has had to the history of London and building the enormous wealth of the capital for hundreds of years.
And maybe a way of doing this is, I guess, talking first about what you see visually. So how maybe has the colour red represented this long history, and how have you brought that to site? And then we'll maybe get into a little bit of the form.
The red that you see, and we're standing on a 170-metre long bridge, which is curving up and down and side to side, and it's completely red. So we're surrounded by red-stained timber, and the red speaks to Canada. And if we look at the Canadian flag, obviously we all know it's red, but the Canadian flag was a flag of colony. It was red before it became the maple leaf. So there's a long history of the use of colour red. If even you go back to the Hudson Bay Company had a red flag. The red is also symbolic of the red pine that was brought from the Canadian forests to London and became a stock wood in the naval shipyards in Britain. The other aspect that's important to me is I'm profoundly colourblind, and the use of colour in my work, or monochromatic relationships, or the use of very strong graphical line work and curves and forms in the work that I do has been really important to bridge the colour blindness. This environment is at the beginning of its growth, but it's an extraordinary green environment. The green will be contrasted greatly by the very powerful red that we're using. So it's fulfilling a kind of dream of redness that I've imagined.
What's remarkable is you've kind of got these stories, there's this depth to it, and there's connection with Canada, emphasising the landscape we're sitting in. But it's also just a remarkably striking thing to be on and be surrounded by, and there's this redness that just kind of jumps out at you, which I think is particularly maybe appealing is if you're somebody that this is going to become part of your commute. It almost becomes a highlight.
The human eye is most attracted to green. So green is the part of vision which we have the most range in. But what the red does is amplify the green because they're complementary colours. And I think the form that you'll see is not the fastest way from A to B. It's perhaps the longest way from A to B that the bridge takes, which is this sinusoidal curve that not only moves from left to right, but also gently dips up and down as you go along it, so that you never quite see the end of it. And as you walk around, it reveals itself to you more and more as you move around. The bridge is never fully knowable. I'm a great subscriber to the theories of Ken Yahara, the art director of Muji, who speaks about making things more unknown. And then that is to know something better, you actually have to make it unknown first. So to make this space, this place, Canada Water, into something new, we have to first make it unknown, or in contemporary terms we call it discoverable, but actually it's about that it's undiscoverable is what it really means. That actually you have to go there and explore it to find out more. So geometrically, this is something of a riddle which your eye has to puzzle over. And I think every morning that someone crosses this bridge, just getting to the tube, they'll discover something new about it. The way that light plays on these vertical fins, or the way that light hits the surface of the water and shines through the boardwalk itself. I think there's always something different about this. And that's what I've tried to do through the form, through the materials used, the amount of timber, the natural materials, the relationship with the environment. And as we've seen today, you also encounter a lot of birds on it, chilling out and taking in the environment. And that's also something of a surprise in the centre of London, to find something that feels at home to wildlife as much as it does to people.
There's another, I guess, technical component I want to touch on. I think there's almost one thing to imbue symbolism and meaning and history in a place through the choice of colour or the use of timber as a material. But you've also taken inspiration structurally from the way that these timber workers used to build their rafts and actually use them to navigate rivers. You found a way to also do that structurally here, which I found quite fascinating and kind of amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm very interested in echoes of time repeating themselves and us connecting with the makers of the past, bridging to the makers of the future. You try to make a boardwalk where all of the planks of wood are aligned in the direction of travel, which is actually quite rare to see. They're normally perpendicular to the direction of travel. So when you walk along this, you'll notice that all lines lead to your destination, that you have to make it in a way that people have made things in the past. We were looking at the rafts, which were often made of 2,000 timber planks that were used to navigate the Ottawa River, which brought these very timbers down to Canada Water in the 1870s, 1880s. And they were strung together in cassettes, groupings of planks. Those cassettes, which would be several meters by 1 meter wide, would then be collected together and staggered to make a single raft surface. And if you come down and walk on this boardwalk, you'll see that we've taken a very similar approach. And the reason is that we need to be able to, over time, take these apart to maintain the bridge. When you make a piece of infrastructure or public realm out of natural materials, you have to maintain it, just as the ancient bridges in Japan are maintained over 500 years. Well, in London, we'll do the same. This isn't something you just make and throw away the key. You look after it. So everything on this bridge is made to be able to be taken apart, just like those rafts. The rafts were taken apart every time they met the rapids on the 1,000-mile journey down the Ottawa River. And there were 40 or 50 craftsmen who would sail with the raft to take it apart. Actually, you need to look backwards to remind ourselves how things are done for longevity in order to make things last for the future.
But what's your hope for how this is used and how this becomes, I guess, part of Canada Water?
I'm very interested in this idea that in the contemporary city, there's an opportunity to connect with the past. And here, literally, you walk across water along a line that our forefathers walked on. It's the idea that these dock workers literally walked on water. It's almost mythological in its status, and we have seen no evidence of that today. But here you are connecting with history, and your footsteps are tracing the same footsteps of the people of the past. And I think that's an extraordinary feeling to unlock in a city which seems so fast.
My thanks to Asif Khan there.
For a celebration of all things print, tune in to The Stack, featuring expert analysis, the view of magazine veterans, and a look at what's flying off newsstands around the world.
This is very unique, to be able to buy a magazine and to find that many doors which you can open and that lead you into very different worlds.
Listen to The Stack and hear Fernando Augusto Pacheco in conversation with our favorite editors. The Stack airs every Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Make it part of your must-listen lineup, live or on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Conjure an image of a city square in the former Eastern Bloc or ex-Yugoslav countries, and it's likely that the picture will feature a modular kiosk. These typical pieces of urban infrastructure were mass-produced from the 1970s to the 1990s. They served as everything from hot dog vendors and flower shops to newsstands and car park booths. While many have fallen into disrepair, some have found new life and continue to provide small moments of service-based commerce. It's an evolution that's explored in a new photo book called Kiosks, the last modernist booths across Central and Eastern Europe. This show's producer, Maylie Evans, caught up with David Navarro, photographer and co-founder of Supergraphica, the independent Polish publishing house behind the book. David began by discussing the first time he encountered a K67, a now iconic modular kiosk system.
The first time I saw a K67, in particular, was on one of my first trips to Poland back in the early 2000s. The kiosk kept my attention. I fell in love with the design of the kiosk. Later on, I saw other examples around various cities in Poland. I also noticed a slightly different model called canny, mainly in the area of woods, but also in Lower Silesia and all around Poland. And later on, I learned a bit more about the K67 kiosk produced in the former Yugoslav countries and was nicknamed a Yugo kiosk in Poland. Later on, I started to notice them while photographing also the housing estates that is the core of our books. Well, K67 is a fabricated modular kiosk made of fiberglass. The initial version of the K67 was a monolithic structure that it was made in one piece, while the second generation was implemented to enhance the production process and logistics. It was firstly produced in the late 60s, the first generation, while the second was produced in the beginning of the 70s. The designer is Sasha Machin. He's a Slovenian architect born in the 40s in Ljubljana. And it has an extra modern vibe for the time, and still now it keeps when you see the K67, you just think about an iPhone, for example. When you see it in the original form, the textures, the fiberglass, the shiny colors, and the minimal design, it makes you think of a beauty piece of design, extremely modern for its time.
And it'd be interesting to find out a bit more about what was going on in the design industry at this moment in time and what was allowing these kiosks to be made in their numbers. What was going on then?
The K67 were produced in ex-Yugoslav countries in the 70s. Yugoslavia was a little bit more Western vibe. It allows entrepreneurs to have their own business. So it was produced in mass for Yugoslavia, but later on was exported to other countries of the former Eastern Bloc, especially in the 80s with the socio-political transformation of the late 80s. It was an effective way to foster the developing entrepreneurship that flourished in that time with the collapse of the USSR and the subsequent political economical transformations. They were used in many forms, from tobacco joints to flower shops in cemeteries to police booths, the ones that are featured in the book. They're still in use, while others are disappearing or just being refurbished.
And with these kiosks that are still in use now, is it a sense of, are people freshening it up with a lick of paint, or are many of them kept with their original design? Has much changed for these spaces?
No, the kiosks themselves has not changed at all. Only some customizations that the owners are applying. For example, when we ask the people that works there, we actually conducted short interviews with many of the owners, and they express pride in their kiosk, but they also discuss the problems with lack of isolation for the winter especially, and also for the summer. So you will see a lot of them that has a little ventilation machines. In other cases, and this is fascinating, they will apply some typography to advertise the products that they are selling. So you will have in many occasions typography from the PRL, the Polish People Republic era, which has, with the pass of time, has cracked and is falling apart, but it has a map of that kind of typography of that moment. So each of the kiosks has a different vibe, different customization of the owners or the people that works there. But in general, the shape or the function hasn't changed at all.
Going back to when these kiosks would have first sprung up across that region, this is a time when a lot of the sort of surrounding urban areas would have been quite grey, quite brutalist. And these are sort of pops of colour amongst that. Tell me a bit more about sort of their wider surroundings and what these spaces would have been like to see.
Many of the kiosks that we feature in the book are within the housing estates of countries like Poland or ex-Yugoslavia, even in the eastern part of Germany. This is because we were documenting some of the housing estates. You can find the kiosk also in the city centers, not only the housing estates, but we found it in the states that generally are perceived as grey. Many of them has different features. Somehow, for my eyes, each of the housing estates is different and quite interesting. But it's true that because of the beton, the concrete in the facades, there is a contrast with the color of the kiosks. Actually, the kiosks in the time were also a window to a different world for all the people that wanted to buy something that they couldn't find in other shops. Many of the kiosks would have not only the colors that characterize this kiosk, but also the color of the magazines that will be imported from the western parts of Germany. So they were like a window to the external world in many levels, also for the sellers, for the entrepreneurs, but also for the buyers going out of their housing, of their flats and going to this thing to see what is going on there. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask about like the modularity of these kiosks, because there are some examples in the book and they're sort of like a single component, and there's others which sprawl a little bit wider. I wonder if you could talk about the importance of modularity here, or the ability to add to a kiosk and expand it if needed.
The first generation was a monolithic piece. While the second generation in the 70s of the K67 and also of the canny, that is the Polish version of the K67, very similar in the function and design and also its modularity. In the second generation, the evolutionary design facilitated a greater versatility, because you could join different models to make different structures. You could just have one, the basic kiosk, but you could also add like a row of 3 or 4 of them to make like a huge area, but not only large. You could also make different shapes like L's, and this gave the space design a lot of versatility. And it was adjusting to the needs of the urban space. Sometimes you will have some limitations. Gave the design of the structures like popping up because of the modular pieces. This was also very practical for installation of the models and also for the shipping and transportation, because they were transported in flat and then they were assembled in place.
And I wondered, out of the numerous examples featured in the book, which is most intriguing for you, or which has left an impression on you, or do you just smile when you think about?
One of the most intriguing is canny that we found in next to the Czech border, and it was used for religious mass merchandising. And they were selling like the ex-pope, better to say, John Paul II cards and candles and things like that. And also they were giving like some tickets for the mass of the day. But also there were other kiosks like police booths that were not in use anymore. But it was the only case that we found as a police booth. And also the exchange currency ones that were in the border with also the Czech Republic. And there was one occasion in which I was a little bit petrified because it's in the entrance of the cemetery, so you will find the families going to buy the flowers, bouquets, and then entering to place them there in the cemetery for the families. I felt a little bit like in a silent, respectful mode, and it was a little bit frozen in general.
Finally, what do you hope, I guess, readers take away from looking at these photographs and seeing the range of uses and models and colours sort of featured on its pages?
This kiosk, including the K67, but not only canny, for example, the KC190 that was designed by Alexander Nikoilski, an architect from the former Yugoslavia, or also a kiosk that is called Batiska that was imported from the USSR. In general, all these kiosks in the former Eastern Bloc are a testament to a design that, like all the great designs, remains timeless and still inspires other designers. The modular structures, I think that they stay memories of the people that were using them, and they continue to evolve. We had the fortune to contact Sasha Matching, the designer of the K67. And well, he's in his 90s, and he told us that nearly 50 years after designing the second generation, he's now working on the third generation of the K67. It's like Steve Jobs saying, wait a minute, now for something else, no? There is also a growing interest in restore and repurpose those kiosks as venues or coffee shops. For example, there is a coffee shop in Berlin that is called Kioski, or mini art galleries, or DJ booths. There is a company also in Berlin that they are restoring them that is called K67 Berlin. So I think there is a new time for these kiosks, and I think the future is bright for them.
David Navarro there in conversation with Maylee Evans. Kiosks, the last modernist booths across Central and Eastern Europe, is published by Supergraphica and available now. I'm now joined in the studio by Monocle researcher Lucrezia Motta. Lucrezia, welcome to the studio component of Monocle on Design.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
It's nice because you've been on the show a heap, out fielding reports for us, but it's nice to we're going to have a little bit of an in-person discussion because you've been doing a host of reporting for the new special edition of Monocle magazine, which is called The Entrepreneurs. It's an annual magazine that we make, and it's all about looking at, how people run businesses, start things from scratch. It's always been sort of like a theme that's run through Monocle for as long as we've sort of been around as a magazine and radio station. We wanted to dive into the design side of those stories and look at people that were, running outstanding businesses, but also had, the facilities to do that work in. So you also reported a story about people making career changes. One of them was Bianca Gerber, who is a former Swiss lawyer who's now a designer and working with carpenters to produce amazing furniture with local craftspeople in Switzerland. I mean, tell me a little bit, was there a lesson? Were you inspired to have a career switch?
It was super interesting to talk with her because for her, this switch was really about kind of being more in touch with herself. I mean, she comes from a family of creatives and artists, and for her, making the switch was really about doing something that she had wanted to really do all along. She makes this gorgeous minimalist furniture with carpenters from across Switzerland, and it's something that rather interesting is that she actually delivers the furniture herself to her clients, and this that last little touch is what I think makes her such a really cool person to talk to and someone whose brand It's so inspiring.
And I think that's the kind of wonderful thing, and hopefully it sort of runs through the entrepreneurs. It's, yeah, obviously you need to make a living and you need to find a way to support yourself. But there are lots of stories like Bianca's where it's about, hey, I was working in law, I was making great money, I was doing all these amazing things, but really what I was looking for was a connection with people and maybe a connection with craft as well. And she's kind of seen that opportunity and jumped on that, which is what sort of jumped out at me. I guess also another report I really enjoyed in the magazine was this one on this French furniture firm called Tolix. Again, it's kind of this career-changey sort of shift. I mean, on Monocle on Design, we're constantly talking about the jump between fashion and furniture, and it was a heritage brand purchased in 2022 by Anton Béjou and Emmanuel Dimos, who are both ex-fashion executives at brands including Balmain. And what was amazing was it was like they had all these kind of lessons that they'd picked up from the fashion world about seasonality, but doing seasonality in a responsible way, about, you know, bringing renewed personality and edge to a brand, which often doesn't translate to furniture. And they've pulled that across and kind of built that into the work they're doing. So I think it's that kind of scope of reporting that we have, everything from small, you know, people doing career changes right through to people doing industry switches. So at a small scale to a very, very large scale. But I want to jump across to this amazing reporting trip that you did in Austria for our Austria survey. Tell us a little bit about some of the people that you met, specifically for Monocle on Design, the architects.
So I got to speak to Harrow Architects. I got to meet them in their beautiful new office in Salzburg. It was founded by Roberto Rodriguez Baraja and Bernd Haslauer. They actually met in Madrid when Haslauer was studying there, and they were both working in the same office. They then moved to Salzburg and founded Harrow in 2012.
So tell me a little bit more about, I guess, what makes their practice so significant and so different. I mean, we're obviously got cross-cultural here, but what about operating and working in Salzburg makes them special?
So I think what's really interesting is that they do these amazing restoration projects, including recently doing the new crypt of the Cathedral of St. Peter's Abbey, which is not only the oldest monastery in Salzburg, but in the entire German-speaking region. It's a 7th century monastery, and you have to bring it into 21st century, which is an incredible task. But the way they did it, not only having to discuss, obviously, with religious associations, with UNESCO, with a lot of different organizations, was being able to bring craftsmen from the region, from Salzburg, including a lot of different carpenters. Roberto was mentioning how impressed he was with the tradition of craftsmanship, and particularly in carpentry in Salzburg. They actually have different names for different types of carpenters, and this precision and this incredible knowledge that they have is what they consider to be the strong point in Salzburg design. And I think this was definitely the one big interesting thing that I found in Salzburg. It's really trying to find that sweet spot between the gorgeous heritage and the super important history, and being contemporary, being new, and being just in 2024.
Lucrezia Motta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well, and our special issue of The Entrepreneurs. Both are on newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.